echinacea. Echinacea is really mild, a mild herb, and sometimes it's good if you take it with something else that's a little bit more stimulating, like ginger or even cayenne, because that kind of wakes up the body and says, hey, there's an herb here that's helpful to you. So just remember that if you're taking. I think I wore my battery out. Yep, I left this on and wore my battery out. Anyway, it's good to take it with something that's more stimulating. Let me see. Before we begin, before I start talking about the topic, air, breathing, and epigenetics tonight, I want to do an exercise with everybody. There's a second hand on this clock up here. Can everybody see the second hand? Okay, what I want you to do, we'll wait until it gets to, not in between the numbers there. What I want you to do is take a big deep breath, and then I want you to slowly exhale, very slowly and controlled, as long as you can. I mean, as long as you can, okay? So we're going to do that, and we'll all start together on the 12. I'm going to let you guys do it, okay? Inhale. Now slowly exhale. And I want you to count how many seconds it takes you to get all of your air out, okay? So some of you may get 20 seconds, some of you may get 30, some of you may get 45 seconds. You're not holding your breath. You're just very slowly exhaling. Now, I want to say something right from the get-go with this presentation. There's a lot of spookiness out there. Remember your number, okay, because we're going to come back to that later on in the talk. So remember how many seconds it took you to do that exhale, okay? This is kind of a carbon dioxide challenge test or tolerance test to see how well you can tolerate carbon dioxide. So as I share the information tonight, I may use the term breath work. I will try not to, but there's a lot of spiritualistic type stuff surrounding breathing and breath work. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the science of breathing and air and all that. So just know that I'm not talking about it from a spiritualistic standpoint. I'm actually talking about it from a biblical standpoint. And my clicker is not working here, so I'll have to do it this way. Okay, so again, we're talking about the 8 laws of health. And we're all the way down to air. So we've done nutrition, exercise, water, sunshine, temperance, and now we're going to talk about air. And when we talk about air, we all breathe. But I think as we go through the presentation tonight, you'll learn a little bit more about breathing and understand why, even though we all do it every day, we hope, all day long, there's a way that you can breathe that actually will be more healthful for you. And we're also going to talk about air quality. Now, what is 1 plus 1? It's 2, right? So if I have 1 and I add 1, then I have 2. If I take away 1, do I still have 2? I only have 1, right? Okay, so let's do the math on this equation. I want to give the biblical basis in the first 2 chapters of the book of Genesis. I believe all of these principles that we had up here a second ago can be found. And I believe that the one on air can be found here in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. The Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, so that's one component, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Those are the 2 components that equal a soul, and man became a living soul. So we are not souls unless we have the dust of the ground and the breath of God. Okay, you take away one of those, you're no longer a soul, you're no longer living. So this breath of God, where does it say God breathed into man? Into his nostrils. Okay, we're going to talk a lot about breathing from the nostrils tonight and why that's important. But also when God created man in Genesis chapter 2 verse 8, after he created him, where did he put him? In a high rise? No, he put them in the garden, right? What do you have in the garden? Sunlight, fresh air.
Life.
You get, yeah, life. Exactly.
Plants that make air.
What's that?
Plants that make air.
Plants that make air. That's a very good point. So the plants, we know, give off oxygen and take in carbon dioxide. We take in oxygen and give off carbon dioxide. So we live in this symbiotic relationship with plants. And particularly trees are very good at this. So our air composition now, and it most likely was different in the beginning, but now the air that we have, 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, less than 1% argon. And you and I, on average, breathe 20 to 25,000 times every single day. Every single day. That's roughly about 30 pounds of air per day. If you look at the diagram here, you probably are well familiar with the components of the respiratory system. This is up here just to kind of, remind us of our anatomy. All right, I want to show a little bit of a video here. It's very short, but I like this video, and I thought that it was good to explain how gas exchange takes place in the lungs. So let's watch this. It's just a couple of minutes long.
The lungs are a pair of spongy organs. In each lung, the bronchus branches into bronchioles. The bronchioles end in a large number of cup-like structures called air sacs. The air sacs are surrounded by a network of capillaries. Gas exchange takes place between the air in the air sacs and the blood in the capillaries. When we breathe in, inhaled air flows through the respiratory tract into the air sac. Oxygen in the inhaled air dissolves in the water film, lining the air sac. Since the oxygen concentration in the water film is higher than that in the blood, oxygen diffuses across the walls of the air sac and the capillaries into the red blood cells. At the same time, since carbon dioxide concentration in the blood is higher than that in the water film, carbon dioxide in the blood diffuses across the wall of the capillaries and the air sac into the water film, and then into the air in the air sac, and is finally exhaled.
So that was just a brief little video, but I really appreciate that because it shows the exchange and everything and where and how it takes place and stuff. Now, you and I, you're sitting listening and I'm standing talking. So we are actually breathing right now. I'm breathing from a different area in my brain than you are. You're relaxed, you're just doing basic breathing. This is taking place in the prebotziger complex. This area of the brain is what controls rhythmic breathing, which is what you're doing right now. But when you're speaking, the parafacial nucleus is what controls breathing. So that, I can't have my rhythmic breathing. So a different area of the brain has to take over and breathe for me. So this area is kind of also, when you did the exercise at the beginning, this is the area that you were breathing from, this parafacial nucleus. Okay, that's where you're actually taking control of your breathing pattern and you're consciously breathing in a certain way. Okay, that's the parafacial complex nucleus. So our lungs don't have any muscles. What's the main muscle of breathing? The diaphragm, yes. So the diaphragm actually contracts and pulls downward, and that expands the chest cavity so that the lungs can expand. And then the intercostal muscles, which are the muscles between the rib cages, here on both sides, those muscles help to lift the rib cage so that our chest can expand. Something interesting that happened to me when I had tetanus back in 2018, I think, was when I had tetanus. The tetanus bacteria had affected the nerves going to my intercostal muscles, and I would desat, or my oxygen would desaturate. I would stop breathing at night, and my sat would go down in the low 70s, and I would wake up just gasping for air. And that, if you don't know, most people that die from tetanus die from asphyxiation because their breathing muscles are paralyzed. And so thankfully that was not severe on me, but I did use oxygen for about 2 months because I could not, my intercostal muscles didn't have the innervation. So until those nerves healed, I had to wear oxygen. Okay? Now, when you breathe through your nose, if you've ever seen, and I should have put a picture of the sinus cavity, but you've probably seen a picture of it. There's all kind of different little cavities and crevices and everything. When you breathe through the nose, I want everybody to kind of take a deep breath real fast through your mouth. Okay, now take a deep breath through your nose. Did you notice that you were able to get in much more air when you came through your nose than when you breathe through your mouth? So when you breathe through your nose, you're getting 20% more oxygen than when you pull it in through your mouth. Okay? Part of what the sinuses do is they moisten, they humidify the air, they clean the air, and they pressurize the air so that by the time it hits the lungs, that air is much cleaner, it's more moist. But when you breathe through your mouth, whatever is in the air, whatever pollutants are in the air, is now in your lungs. You've bypassed your filtration system. You've bypassed your humidification system. So it's very important that we begin to learn. And that's what this little piece of tape is on my shirt here. I'm going to show you in just a minute what that's for. Okay, let's talk about air ions. Outdoor air has negative air ions. Have you ever noticed when you go to the beach, when you go to the lake, when you go to the river, when you're walking in a forest, that you breathe much better, you feel better, you sleep better? This has to do with these negative air ions. Negative air ions actually help to put a stronger electrical charge on our cells. Lightning also increases negative air ions. We have an increased sense of well-being and, again, more energy. And I mentioned the electrical charges on our cells. Now, most people today are shallow breathers. I watch people. As a healthcare practitioner, it's my job to be very observant. And I watch people. All of you are breathing more deeply now because you know I'm watching you. But I do. I watch people, and most people just breathe from the tops of their lungs very shallow, and they're chest breathing, and many people right from the mouth. This is not good for you. Okay, and we're gonna talk tonight about why. We are actually born breathing properly. Babies, if you watch a baby, where do they breathe from? They breathe from their belly. They're abdominal breathers, diaphragmatic breathers. But as we get older, what happens to our posture? And this collapses the lungs. The pectoral muscles contract. All the muscles in the back stretch out. And then we start having back problems, neck problems. But if we watch our posture, open up the chest cavity, we can actually aid ourselves in becoming belly breathers. Okay? So we do need to relearn. Posture is very important for proper breathing. Now let's dive in a little bit to the epigenetic aspect, because we're looking at these laws of health through the lens of epigenetics, and we want to understand how or if this particular law of health applied to my life can actually change how my genes express themselves. That's epigenetics. Okay, we've talked about DNA methylation and telomeres and all these things. We're not going to go too much into all that tonight, but here is a study that looked at the cognitive skills of office workers at different levels of CO2. Okay, we're going to dive into a little bit of science now. At 1,000 parts per million of carbon dioxide, CO2, there was a 15% reduction in ability, cognitive abilities. Studies done at schools in Texas, Idaho, and Washington, the CO2 levels were above 1,000 parts per million. We bring the kids in the classroom, we sit them down, we shut them up, and we expect them to pay attention. But they're breathing stale air, air that's full of positive air ions, which is causing depression, anxiety, all these things. If we open up the windows and let these kids wiggle around and play outside and stuff, they're much better. Kids do better after they come in after recess. They're much more attentive. At 1,400 parts per million, there was a 50% decrease in cognitive ability. That is huge. Half of your cognitive ability is gone at 1,400 parts per million. At 2,000 parts per million, there's side effects such as nausea, headache, fatigue, sleepiness, loss of attention, confusion, increased heart rate, poor concentration. Indoor air is constantly recirculated and becomes very contaminated. Indoor air can be up to 5 and even 10 times more toxic than what's outside. Even if, like today, the Canadian fires have this haze of smoke. I could even smell the smoke this morning. There's no local fires. That's from Canada. I see that haze and I know that's affecting me. I've had a lot more coughing today and I haven't felt as well today. And I believe it's that air. But the indoor air can be much more toxic than that. This is especially vital when we look at our sleeping rooms because we spend roughly a third of our lives in bed in our sleeping rooms. If you're not sleeping in a room that's well ventilated, even in the wintertime, just a tiny little crack to get that fresh air in is going to help you sleep much better and much more healthfully. Bedrooms and cars frequently reach a level of 4,000 parts per million of carbon dioxide and higher. Motorcycle helmets, this one blew my socks off. I had no idea. But the full-face motorcycle helmets with the shield and the chin guard and everything, they've measured CO2 levels within those helmets 10,000 parts per million, and that can cause permanent brain damage, yes.
How much do you think would be there if you were wearing that mask all day long?
Yes, think about that. The face diapers that everybody had to wear a couple years ago.
Some are still wearing.
Some are still wearing it, yes, and I believe it's coming back. Now, I don't want to paint CO2, carbon dioxide, as altogether bad, because it actually plays a very important role in the body. In fact, I think we're going to talk about it in a little bit. It's on this slide. It's when you saw the little red blood cells and how oxygen kind of hops on. It's the CO2 that opens that little cage to allow the oxygen to go into the tissues. So CO2 is actually important for oxygen getting into tissues. It opens up the little cage that's around it. I listened to a lecture when I was studying this by this Dr. Shireen Whitkop that was very interesting, and it will help you understand me and my southern blood a little bit, and it helped me to understand y'all and your northern blood a little bit. Because they discovered, they were doing research on the epigenetic effect of air pollution on people from different regions. And they discovered that people who are from a more northern, North Dakota's pretty far north, people who are from a more Arctic, more northern climate, our DNA has its own, or our mitochondria has its own DNA. So people that are from farther north, their mitochondrial DNA is not as tightly packed in the mitochondria, and so they actually produce more heat but less energy. So that helps you guys stay warmer. But those of us from a more equatorial environment, which Alabama can be fairly equatorial in the summer, we have our mitochondrial DNA is more tightly packed, which produces more energy but less heat. Because we're in this hot environment, we don't need that much heat because our environment is hot. But the thing that happens with this more tightly packed mitochondrial DNA in people like me from the South is it makes us more susceptible to air pollution. We create more inflammation, more reactive oxygen species. So I'm the canary in the coal mine in this bunch. I am much more sensitive to air pollution than those of you from a northern climate because of my mitochondrial DNA. And I thought that was very interesting. Okay, when you have air pollution, it increases your risk for heart disease, and that's why someone who is from this more equatorial climate is at greater risk for developing disease from air pollution. So that's a very, I thought it was interesting. Here is a study, and I'm just going to read this quote. I pulled this quote directly from this study. So this shows very clearly that the air you breathe can change your genetic expression. So if you're breathing toxic air, you're setting yourself up for disease manifestation. Emerging data indicate that air pollution exposure modulates the epigenetic mark, which is DNA methylation. We've talked about that in our previous talks in this series. And that these changes might in turn influence inflammation, disease development, and exacerbation risk. The same study showed that a fetus in the womb has restricted growth if the mother lives in an environment with high levels of air pollution. So a child in utero, if a woman is living in an environment with polluted air, is going to be smaller. And that's why women who smoke have smaller babies as a general rule. Okay, here's a study that showed that children who are that unborn children who are exposed, and this kind of goes along with the previous slide, it damages their genetics. So it's not just low birth weight, it actually damages the genetics of these unborn babies if they're exposed in utero to air pollution. And this study also shows that exposure to polluted air causes an increase in inflammatory cytokines in adults. So these are things that drive inflammation in our bodies. Here is a study that shows a very clear link between congenital heart disease and exposure to airborne environmental pollutants. Here is another study, and there's just study after study after study that shows how breathing polluted air can affect our genetic expression. Chronic exposure to air pollution causes cytogenic damage, DNA strand breakage, your DNA is breaking, epigenetic changes, altered gene expression. All these changes are associated with higher risk factors for many diseases, especially cancers. So the air we breathe is very important. My mother, her house had some mold, and my husband did a lot of remediation, ripped out all the carpets, redid the kitchen, completely gutted my dad's man cave, which was full of mold, and just cleaned all that out, sealed it up. And then my mother bought a kind of expensive air filter. I think it was like $1,000 or something like that. And it made a huge difference in the indoor air in her house, a massive difference. So that was a big blessing. So what are some of the things that we find in indoor air that are harming us? Cleaning chemicals, sprays, bleach, I don't know, whatever all the chemicals are that are commercially available. I mostly use vinegar for cleaning, or my mother has, she's a Melaleuca dealer, and she sells this Melaleuca that has a lot of essential oils in it for cleaning. Scented candles and those sprays, scented bathroom sprays and scented candles. If you are burning scented candles in your home, and they're not like soy candles or beeswax candles, if they're regular petroleum candles, you may as well drive your car in the living room and fire it up, because you're putting petroleum into your breathing air. Mold and mildew and bacteria, dust and dust mites. By the way, It's good to dust frequently because mold lives in dust. It reproduces in dust. Animal dander, outgassing from building supplies, cooking fuel emissions using gas stoves. You really need ventilation if you're using these. God forbid you should be using kerosene heat in the house. You definitely need some ventilation with these kind of things. All right, this study looked specifically at bedroom air quality. And poor bedroom air quality contributes to lower cognitive abilities, fatigue, waking up feeling tired, feeling lethargic, poor bedroom air quality. And other studies list nausea, dizziness, anxiety, headaches, and irritability as signs of hypoxia as well. We're going to talk a little bit about hypoxia as we go on. Now, those who mouth breathe tend to be those who have sleep apnea, tend to be those who snore. Okay? If you're mouth breathing at night, that's where my little piece of tape is going to come in just shortly. Okay? Sleep apnea is periods of absence of breathing or very shallow breathing. This puts the person at an extreme risk for cardiovascular accidents such as heart attacks and stroke. It shortens the lifespan, throws you over into hypoxia.
With the CPAP?
What's that?
Shortens the life with using the CPAP?
The CPAP does help to correct some of this, but there's a way that you can correct it unless your sleep apnea is severe or obstructive. There's ways you can correct it without CPAP. In fact, let me just share something. And I'm thankful that the Lord brought this back to my mind because recently my husband and I went to my chiropractor in Bismarck, Amanda Messer, Dr. Messer. And she brought up, when she was adjusting Kalen, she asked him about sleep posture. And she said, you need to have your chin up because when your chin is up, your airway is open. And so that night and several nights after that, he's kind of forgotten about it now, but for several nights, he focused on keeping his chin up and he did not snore. And let me tell you, he can snore. So, but with his chin, yes, you honey. And maybe you got it from Mom. But when your chin is up, you don't snore. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So bodybuilders, guys with big thick necks, or obese, people who are obese with the big thick neck are more prone to sleep apnea. Snoring is actually an obstruction in the airway. And did you know that sleep apnea can actually contribute to the development of diabetes? That's an interesting statistic. It can also contribute to erectile dysfunction and female sexual dysfunction, cognitive dysfunction, daytime sleepiness, and brain fog. As a people in general, we sleep half awake and we're awake half asleep because we're not sleeping properly at night. And so we're basically the walking dead because our sleep quality is so poor.
See, Bob is on a CPAP, sleep apnea.
You have a CPAP?
Yeah, Bob is.
Bob?
On it. Yeah.
Okay.
He's on it. And then the other day at his appointment, the doctor had said, his breathing isn't, still not yet the greatest. They're trying to clean it up. Yeah, and then she said, well, how do you sleep? He said, well, I sleep mostly on my back. She said, no. And she said, you're better off going to your side.
Mm-hmm.
Sleeping on your side with it.
Okay.
And so then he's been trying to do that, but he's not a side sleeper. He's like,
okay.
Yeah.
Even if you sleep on your back, though, if you put like a rolled towel or roll up a small pillow and extend the neck, we're supposed to have a 30-degree curve in the neck and a 30-degree curve in the low back. We're not supposed to be straight. Okay, we need these curves. So if you support that curve at night, it opens that airway so you're less likely to have this sleep apnea. Okay, so that's something that the CPAP is helpful in severe cases of sleep apnea, yes. But another thing that you can do is mouth taping. Now, I'm not talking about, okay, somebody's kidnapped me, so I got duct tape all over my mouth, okay? But I have a couple of pieces of tape here. You can practice wearing this in the day, and I can still talk to you and wear this. But that's all it takes, just enough to remind yourself, and if that's not enough, you can go a little bit bigger. If you're a guy with a mustache, you'll have to go smaller. But that's all you need. It's just enough to remind you to keep your mouth closed, okay? It's not going to cause you to panic or anything like that, but it reminds you to keep your mouth shut so that you can mouth breathe at night, okay? So you can see how small a piece of tape, and what they recommend actually, and this was in James Nestor's book, Breath. This whole book is about breathing. It's amazing. This is a very interesting book. He got into a little bit of spiritualistic stuff, which I just bypassed, but the science on breathing is phenomenal. It's amazing. So they recommend that you wear this starting about 30 minutes in the daytime, just to get yourself used to feeling it there so that it doesn't irritate you at night, and then switch to wearing it at night. And Kalen doesn't know it, but he's about to try this. He's a good sport. So okay, attention to sleep posture. And then if you will practice nasal breathing in the daytime. Now you might say, my nose is all clogged up. The more you breathe through your nose, the more clear it will become. And that's a fact. And here's a breathing exercise that you can do. Let me wait, because I think I have that in just a minute. Okay? So if you practice this nasal breathing in the daytime, it actually sets you up to have success to become a nasal breather at night, particularly if you use the mouth taping. But you shouldn't have to be up and down drinking water. I drink water all night long, and I tend to breathe through my mouth at night. So I am also going to tape my mouth shut at night. So we will be taped shut together. So in the daytime, I do very well. I try to be very conscious of my posture, and I try to consciously breathe through my nose in the daytime. So breathing techniques. If you want to, here's just some tips, okay? When we breathe properly and deeply and everything, it's actually very calming to the nerves, because when we breathe off too much carbon dioxide, I think it's called hypocapnia. It can actually cause a lot of anxiety. Okay, we used to give certain drugs when I worked in critical care. I used to work on the code team, and we would give certain drugs for people, who had hyperventilated or whatever. So, okay, so if you want to calm your nerves, you can do this: 2 quick inhales and then a slow exhale. Okay, we're using our nose. Let's do this together. 2 quick inhales and a slow exhale through the nose. We're using the nose. This is called the physiological sigh, and animals even do this. And if you'll notice, when you're really stressed, you kind of do it. Okay, calm down. It actually is very soothing. It does work. It helps a lot. So, and then if you want to aid with your sleep, you can inhale. I don't want you to do this now because I don't want you to fall asleep on me. Inhale, a count of 4, so you're inhaling 4 seconds. And then you hold it for 7 seconds, and then you exhale for 8 seconds. Okay, this is very relaxing, can help you to sleep. So next time you're struggling with sleep, you can do this breathe pattern, 4, 7, 8. Okay, 4 seconds in, 7 seconds hold, 8 seconds out. Very relaxing, helps with sleep. And then there's box breathing, where you're 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out, 4 seconds hold. And these patterns of breathing help with something that we know as heart rate variability. You want to have a little bit of heart rate variability, that people who have good, healthy, which means you're not exactly the same between each heartbeat. There's just a little bit milliseconds difference. That heart rate variability is affected by this type of breathing. Okay, and I covered that. If you mouth breathe at night, you're more likely to snore and have apnea. Did you know that you can also overbreathe? Most of us overbreathe. When I used to count the respirations of people when I was still practicing nursing, most people breathe an average of 16 to 26 times per minute, and it's very shallow. Okay, that is blowing off too much CO2. People become anxious and all these things. Actually, I checked myself when I was researching this. I was doing these breathing exercises, box breathing and all that. I was very comfortable breathing 6 times a minute. Very comfortable. And I could even go 4 times a minute. There are people who practice this type of breathing. They get their body more tolerant to carbon dioxide, more capable to absorb oxygen and utilize it, who can dive and hold their breath for 12 minutes. That's incredible. Most people, 3 minutes, they're curtains. They're curtains, okay? So, okay, when we overbreathe, we're blowing off again too much CO2, and that's called hypocapnia. I mentioned earlier about how carbon dioxide is important for the delivery of oxygen to the tissues. So that's what this bullet point talks about. And this chronic overbreathing causes chronic hypoxia, and you see the percentage there. 30 to 40% less oxygen is delivered to the brain. No wonder we're so anxious. No wonder we can't sleep at night. No wonder we want to sleep in the day. Our brains are hypoxic. They're not getting enough air. We need to learn how to breathe. Here's some benefits of nose breathing. It slows the airflow. It pressurizes the air, because do you notice more resistance when you take in a quick breath through your mouth or through your nose? Which has more resistance? Let's do it. Here, let's go through the mouth. Okay, let's go through the nose. Which has more resistance? The nose. And that's because of all of those cavities in there, okay? So that's a benefit. It's giving us more oxygen. So nose breathing also purifies and humidifies the air, filters out bacteria and viruses. 40% of the population has an issue with the nose, and some statistics even say 70% of people have like a deviated septum. But you can still, the saying, you use it or lose it. You know, when you practice nose breathing, it actually gets easier. Your body becomes more adapted to it.
So if somebody is hyperventilating, then they're using way too much?
Have you ever noticed when they're hyperventilating, what do? You take a bag and... Okay, that's like a rebreathing mask. It's going to help to bring that CO2 and oxygen back into balance. Okay, when you do it into the bag. Because when you're hyperventilating, you're blowing off too much CO2. Okay, and you get all tingly and numb. You know, if I wasn't standing up here talking to y'all, I would practice it, and I could get all tingly and lightheaded, and you might have to scoop me up off the floor. So when you mouth breathe, it's more difficult to focus. Your brain is not functioning as well because it's hypoxic. Mouth breathing causes the mouth to dry out, and this can lead to cavities. Did you know that? Yes. Mouth breathing can also, you notice if you look at pictures of, the old pictures, the ones of our grandparents and great-grandparents, their faces were more blocky and square. Nowadays, we have more people with long, narrow faces. A lot of this has to do with posture and mouth breathing. The more the nose is used for breathing, the more the mouth nasal passage is open. I mentioned that. I mentioned that we receive 20% more oxygen through a nasal breath than through a mouth breath. Breathing can also affect the density of our bones. And according to Dr. John Flutter in 2007, he made the statement, all mouth breathers have crooked teeth. And I had crooked teeth. We're going to look at a picture in just a little bit that I dropped in here just before we started. Mouth breathing causes longer, more narrow face and a more narrow dental arch, which causes the teeth to be crowded. And you can actually feel like your tongue is too big for your mouth, because it is. It's actually the pressure of the tongue. Your tongue should rest, the back 2/3 of it should rest in the roof of your mouth. That pressure from the tongue helps to keep your dental arch open. Okay? So, yeah, it's on this bullet point here. So when you don't have that, when your tongue is dropped and your mouth is open, it narrows that dental arch when you do that habitually. I'll show you a picture in just a minute. All infants, all animals are nose breathers. Dogs will breathe through their mouth when they're panting, but as a general rule, they are nose breathers. Look at this picture. This is very interesting. A nose breather, this is the structure of the face. You can actually change the structure of your face by habitually nose breathing. It can actually change, just like orthodontics. You can change the structure of your face from this undershot jaw, big crooked nose, by nose breathing. Everybody try this. Place 3/4 of your tongue up in the roof of your mouth, with the tip of your tongue resting gently behind your teeth, but not pushing on your top front teeth. Everybody got that? Now try to breathe through your mouth while keeping your tongue there. You can't do it. This is the natural posture for nose breathing. Okay? Now here's the tip. If your sinus passages are blocked or stuffy, even like if you have a head cold, let's try this. You want to take an easy breath in and easy out, and then hold it out. So we're going to breathe in and out, hold it, then we'll pinch your nose, do like this. Okay, everybody, in, out, pinch your nose, side to side, up and down. When you feel like you just got to have air, then you can take a breath through your nose. It should feel it. You went through your mouth.
Busted.
Busted. I tried this when I had a stuffy nose, and I was amazed because it works. It really helped to open up my sinuses. Now here's a movement called Cottle's maneuver. 2 fingers on either side. I used to see my stepdad do this. 2 fingers on either side, and you kind of pull outward. If it's easier to breathe in when you do that, then you may have some blockage in there, and you may actually benefit from doing that other exercise that we did and practicing breathing through the nose.
I used to see that on athletes a lot. They would wear that tape across their nose that would stretch it out.
Okay. Now, if you remember the thing that we did at the very beginning where I had you watch the clock, okay, you had a big breath in through your nose, and then you exhaled as slowly as possible. Who had 20 seconds? 20 seconds? Okay. Who had 25 seconds? 30. A lot of you had 30 seconds. 35, 40, 45. You're a singer, so I would expect yours to be more because you sing. Okay, if here is your score. If you had 20 seconds or less, give yourself a 3. If you had 20 to 40 seconds, you're 5 to 6. Okay, this is your score, and I'll tell you what it means in just a minute. If you had 45 to 60 seconds, give yourself an 8 to a 10. Okay, now, when you box breathe, whatever your number was, if you were a 3, you're going to breathe in 3 seconds, hold it 3 seconds, breathe out 3 seconds, hold it 3 seconds, breathe in 3 seconds. You got it? If your score was a 5 to 6, then your box breathing would be 5 seconds in, hold 5 seconds, 5 seconds out. You follow me? Okay. This is a very good exercise, and that also can tell you how tolerant you are to carbon dioxide. If your score was a 3 and you had like 20 seconds, you don't tolerate carbon dioxide better as well, and you're probably a mouth breather. Okay, those of you who sing are more accustomed to pushing from the diaphragm, you may be more of a nose breather. So this box breathing allows you to develop better, deeper, stronger breathing, and with even fewer breaths, you become more neurologically astute. You have more neurological control over your breathing while you're awake, and that will improve your sleep breathing, so that it improves sleep apnea, snoring, and things like that. So, and then along with the mouth taping, it's a very good thing. Last slide here, Mark 8:12. This is talking about Jesus. It said, He sighed deeply in His spirit and said, Why doth this generation seek after a sign? Verily I say unto you, there shall be no sign given to this generation. Jesus had to deal with a lot of stress when He was dealing with hard-headed people. And that sigh, the sigh is a way to mitigate stress. So if you're stressed out, that very good way to mitigate stress. Okay, that's all that I wanted to share with you on breathing. I hope it was beneficial. I hope you learned something. I hope I've encouraged you all to become nose breathers habitually, not mouth breathers. And that includes watching your posture, awake and asleep. Yes, ma'am.
With that type of breathing, with the different ways of doing it, it also helps your blood pressure.
Yes, it does, and that's a good point. I thank you for bringing that out, because that's something that I forgot to mention. When you breathe through your nose, nitric oxide is produced in the nose. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator, and it helps to lower blood pressure. It helps in a lot of ways, but that's one of the main ways, is it helps to lower blood pressure. So, any other comment or question? Okay, everybody's holding their breath. So I hope everybody, you can use medical tape. This is actually just a tiny little piece of white duct tape. It works. I mean, Scotch tape might be kind of itchy. I don't know. But I like that the medical tape that they put on you after they draw your blood, it's not the paper tape, we call it silk tape. I like that kind, but I couldn't find any quick, so I just used what I could find. And you know, if you panic at night, you can always push this off with your tongue fast, or it comes off easy. So it's not going to keep your mouth shut. It's not like somebody's kidnapped you and duct taped your mouth shut. So, okay, that's it.